Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. We are again here with a very special episode on body positivity eating disorder. And I'm so excited to have a very special guest today, Tara Deliberto, who is a clinical psychologist and meditation retreat facilitator from New York. She is the primary author of the book Eating Disorders in Adolescents. She is an assistant director of New York Western Hospital Eating Disorder Partial Hospitalization Program. She is the co-chair of the Academy for Eating Disorders Membership Recruitment and Retention Committee, as well as the Technology and Innovation Specialist, sparing her precious time and joining us here today to talk about this very important and burning issue in Pakistan and for supporting this cause of promoting awareness among the population of Pakistan regarding regarding eating disorders and especially of a very interest group age group that are the adolescents. Thank you so much, Tara, and welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. So now, without wasting any time, because I know our audience would love to hear more from Tara, so I will be speaking less, and I'll be trying to give Tara more time to talk. So, she can enlighten us with so many issues, and especially how to treat the adolescents with suffering with eating disorders, specifically in Pakistan. Looking at the constraints the developing countries are facing here, and we do not have those facilities and experts for treating. So, starting with my first question, Sarah, in your experience, what are some of the challenges like you face when you are working with adolescents suffering from eating disorders?
What a great question. So first off, it's really interesting to note that eating disorders, unlike lots of other disorders and diseases, are actually easier to treat in younger populations. And the earlier the age of onset, kind of the better the prognosis, so long as family or loved ones jump in to help. So eating disorders are typically disorders that people don't present as wanting to address because there is a motivation, an internal motivation to lose weight and to fit society's ideals, and for instance, not be bullied or shamed for one's body. So people with eating disorders typically want to continue the behavior, and either they're not aware that there's a risk that they could become ill or even die, or the disorder is so strong that they're not in touch with a side of themselves that is actually concerned about becoming ill or dying, because the drive towards losing weight or changing one's body in some way is so strong. So when someone is younger, either a child or an adolescent, parents or family typically have a greater degree of control around the food. So they're better able to say, listen, you need to go to the doctor. You need to make sure that your heart is healthy. And also, this is what you're going to eat. You're going to eat this for breakfast, this for lunch, this for dinner. So although there are challenges with treating eating disorders in adolescence, it actually is a good thing if a person's younger. So some of the other challenges, though, that come along with adolescents who have eating disorders is that they have access to social media and kind of the older generation likely. And so they're getting fed this content about what bodies should look like and how dieting should happen. And none of this information is really controlled. And then on top of that, they're getting exposed to their peers shame, and they might even be engaging in some of this shaming and praising themselves. Just gets that can be very helpful for parents or loved ones to do is very much limit access to social media. So again, there's a con, meaning there's a negative aspect to this social media piece, but the fact that a person's younger means that loved ones can come in and mitigate those social influences, which is a really positive thing.
So I think now this is something, I think this is a good and positive news for the parents, like in Pakistan also, that, it's much easier to treat eating disorder among the kids, like because that's the most important thing is the family support and the parental support, which actually comes in and they can help their kids to, fight against eating disorders. So this is really a very, this is so, you can say that encouraging to know that at least, parents can come in and jump in and they can help their kids to fight with the eating disorder. So, do you see perfectionism as a more significant risk factor among adolescents for being more prone to eating disorders?
Absolutely. I think that perfectionism plays a really key role in both the onset and the maintenance of the eating disorder, meaning why it starts and how it continues. So there are also temperament factors that are involved. So when someone is really conscientious, perfectionistic, and also they're able to learn from the environment and they want to please people in the environment, or they want to live up to certain ideals, that is a really significant risk factor for people with eating disorders, not because there's anything bad inherently with wanting to make sure that your parents are pleased and that you're doing the right thing as you're developing as a child. But the issue is that when a person with perfectionism or that kind of temperament is put into a toxic environment, where instead of there being we'll say like moral ideals being promoted, there's this thin ideal being promoted. And so the person gets the message, oh, thin is better and I need to be thin, and so I'm going to do this. And so it's less the person's fault and more that there's this very toxic emotional ecosystem that the person lives in, and then they bring in those toxins and they try really hard to be a perfectionist, right? And to live according to those ideals, which in this case is very problematic because the ideal of thinness is rooted in an idea that inherently our bodies are not good enough and we must change them, right? So when you're moving towards an ideal that's rooted in this idea that you're inherently not good enough and that you can be broken down into just your body, and you're kind of overlooking your soul or your consciousness or your talents or likes or dislikes, personality, and you're being minimized to your body, that is very, very, very toxic for a person, and very much could contribute to the onset of an eating disorder.
See from this is, actually I read somewhere that perfectionist is very close, more prone towards being perfect in their life. So it's accept yourself as you are. So it might help help a person more to, I think start the journey ahead. So, and it's not a disease actually. It's not a choice actually. It's actually a disease, or it's actually a disorder. So, very true, Tara. Like Tara has said that you really need to have this thing, like getting over with this idea of thin idols, and and try to accept your body as it is. So, Tara, my next question is like, what evidence-based therapeutic approaches do you find like really work actually in treating eating disorders, especially in adolescents?
It's a big question and a good one. So there are a few different modalities: individual treatment and group treatment. And so about 10 years ago, when I was treating eating disorders, it became clear that we're not really meeting the needs of the patients fully. And so what I had done treatment and compile them into this book called Treating Eating Disorders in Adolescents. And so what is represented in this book is basically that when a person is very severe in their presentation with the eating disorder, they have a very severe case. For instance, maybe they're malnourished, they're underweight, or there's lots of behaviors like purging going on, dangerous behaviors. Again, parents need to kind of swoop in and help and take away control of food from the child, from the adolescent, and start and being very kind of strict about the fact that this meal needs to be finished. The food is very helpful in the family accepting whatever fear is at the core of the disorder. So for instance, if a person is very confidence that it's not the person's body that is the problem, it is the bully that's the problem, and the bullying behavior and that culture, and to accept that that bullying might happen, and that we can work on skills to not internalize all of those messages, and we can work on things to say to the people who are engaging in the bullying that are assertive and push back against the behavior. There are other reasons as well that a person might be afraid of gaining weight or afraid of eating, such as being abandoned, being judged, having a boyfriend or significant other, a romantic partner leave them. And so whatever the fear is that's really maintaining the eating disorder, we can get to the core of it by processing those fears. In addition to what skills can be taught in a group setting. So skills to manage one's thoughts, to notice when irrational thoughts are coming in mindfully, to accept the thoughts and then let them go. And so there are all of these different types of interventions that can be used to help a person through an eating disorder, regardless of what that eating disorder is. And it's just about kind of figuring out which constellation or a combination of interventions is best for each person.
Okay, so Tara, you just talked about the fears, actually, understanding the phenomena, like what kind of fear a person is actually suffering from, which might be one of the triggering factor for that particular, eating disorder, for a particular eating disorder in Southeast Asian culture. The bullying is one of the very common family members, or even by the, at school. That is very common. It's very, it's okay to pass comments about anyone's body or any kind of fears of, having a specific body to, to get married. Because like, even the guy's family and even the guys, they want that thin ideal, a girl to get married. And doesn't matter that how the boy will look himself, but it's like more common and more, pressure is on the women in most of the Southeast Asian cultures, even by the families. And you know so we see these kinds of fear very common in Pakistan, and we see that how people are struggling with it, and they are using all kind of surgeries and medications, even get smart, or what kind of figure they would really want to get in order to get married. So and now what I've perceived is that we see that these social and cultural norms and pressures actually lead to those fears of achieving some motives or some goals, and which actually converts into or triggers this eating disorder. So,
Mhm.
Tara, my next question is, and this is a very important question, and I really wanted to know this because my one of my niece actually, she is like, we think that she might be suffering from an eating disorder. So, and she's just like, 6 years old. So, so many parents are actually, they have actually sent us this question, that specifically how, how we can screen, or how we can identify eating disorder, the signs and symptoms of eating disorder, specifically among, children under 12, because there is no tool available, like a screening tool,
Mhm.
get them identify or to see. So, what kind of symptoms do you think, like, they should be alarming when any parent, or when any parent see those symptoms in their kids, specifically in the age group of 3 to 8 years? So they should be cautious that they might be suffering from an eating disorder. And specifically, I would like to know about binge, because that is very common in Pakistan. Like, we see that kids can't control, even they are full. They say that our tummy is full, but we really want to eat more. So I would like you to enlighten us that what could be the possible 3 to 4 signs for a layman parent, like he or she should be cautioned, like the kid might be suffering from it.
Yeah, what a great question. It's so important. We're seeing eating disorders younger and younger, and it's very alarming. And what I'll say first, and then we can get to the signs and symptoms, is that children, there's very little room for nuance when teaching things to children, right? So if you teach a child this is a good food and this is a bad food, then they will rigidly adhere to that. And they'll say, oh no, it's bad if I eat this, and I'm bad if I eat this. And so if we dichotomize food into two categories, good or bad, that sets the stage for eating disorders and binge eating. Because what can happen in a binge eating mentality is this idea of, oh, there are good and bad foods, but I really want the bad foods. But if I eat the bad foods, I'm bad, but I can't help it. I really want this bad food. So I'm going to eat the bad food. And well, I've already broken the rules, so I might as well eat all of the bad food. And so you can see this binge process happening when we separate foods into good or bad, especially with children, again, because their minds can't handle the nuance of, oh, it's okay sometimes to have this bad food. Like, it's just good or bad. So what has been happening with television programming and school programming is that schools are saying, these foods are junk foods or bad foods. And it's potentially a well-intended effort, but there's no measurement happening of these programs or television shows. And so everybody thinks they're doing this great thing by teaching children good or bad foods. But really what's happening is that there's this chaos being created inside the minds of these children and adults as well that leads to binge eating disorder. It's very psychologically unhealthy to think of foods as unhealthy. And if you put that in the context of an entire social system, particularly around girls and women, that says, your worth is measured by your body, and you will not be able to get married and fill out your duties unless you look a certain way. There's immense pressure to only eat the healthy foods. But that internally creates a sense of angst, and it's healthy, I think, that angst to kind of push back against it and feel inside like this isn't right. There's an injustice happening. I shouldn't be, just eating these foods. And why is it so important that, I look a certain way? And so there's this, I think, again, a very healthy rebellion that happens against a toxic messaging system. And so that again can lead to binge eating. So it's very difficult to protect children from this. I have difficulty with my own 4-year-old child protecting him from these messages, because if you just let the TV on, soon enough, there will be some sort of child programming happening about good and bad foods. And so I try to run into the living room and shut it off and tell him that, all foods are good, and, we can make room for all of these different foods, and it's good to eat a variety of foods, and, that kind of a thing, and not get too black and white about the messaging there. So it's very, very difficult to prevent that messaging from happening and from the children from getting it. But I think it's good to start trying to, at the very least, within your own families and with your own children or children in your family. So in terms of the signs that could be evident in children, there is a refusal of certain foods outright. You see really rigid refusals in children, like, I don't want to eat anything except for this one food, this one vegetable. I treated a child who would only eat steamed vegetables because she was told in her preschool that steamed vegetables were healthy, and so she would not eat anything else. So when you see these really rigid rules around food, or not eating certain foods, or feeling bad, or saying certain foods are bad, or I'm bad for eating certain foods, those are major, major red flags. If children are also looking at their bodies, so there's the eating piece, but there's also the body piece. So if children are looking at their bodies in the mirror and saying, I'm fat, or I'm not pretty, or, I'm not muscular enough, or whatever it is, those sorts of body comments, especially in younger children, it is a pretty good indicator that there's potentially an eating problem as well. Certainly a body image problem, but that could, those body image insecurities could lead to perfectionistic eating behavior, to your earlier point, right? When we're feeling insecure, we try to fix that insecurity, not through acceptance, but through changing the behavior, right? Which just gets us further and further down into that psychological dark place, right? So when you're seeing, any of these body image concerns coming up, that's troubling. And it's also troubling if they're engaging in that behavior towards other children. So if they're saying that other children are fat or ugly, or they're name calling or shaming in some way, that's also very problematic, because that means they're walking around with that internal dialogue and applying it to themselves, and then they're applying it to others, propagating the problem. So it's both important to look at if they're body shaming themselves and body shaming others.
Yeah. So I think this is something which really the parents need to, look at the behaviors, monitoring them, how they actually interact with their friends, and even what they are, what sort of comments they are actually making about themselves and about foods. And yes, you're so right that I also see this very common phenomena even in every family, that they categorize the food like this is a junk food, this is a bad food, and they, like, tag the foods. And I think this is very common all across the world, I guess. So
Yes.
yes, you are quite right that we need to stop tagging the food, and we really need to emphasize more on having a balanced diet rather than going and labeling any food good or bad. So I think this is a very strong message for all the parents who are watching us. Like, please stop tagging the foods and get your child a concept of a healthy, balanced diet. It's better than tagging the food. So as you all know, and I have mentioned in the introduction, that Tara is the author of a wonderful book. So, Tara, we would like you to share some valuable insights from your book titled Treating the Eating Disorder Among Adolescents with our audience. We really would like to see what you have for us, like some kinds of tips among adolescents. So please, Tara, share some insights from your book.
Disorders in adolescents. It's a treatment manual for clinicians. Spanish, and it's for clinicians. There are handouts that come along with the book. So you can go on New Harbinger's website pull away from food and give it back. And the handouts kind of outline all the various ways that the child might push back against and how to hang in there and emotionally take care of yourself and your family. Handouts that explain how a disorder and skills, both in the individual and group format, that they might learn to help themselves regulate their emotions and get through. Has an eating disorder, or a child that you know has an eating disorder, or if you have an eating disorder, it might be really helpful to take a look at the individual and the group handouts. So that is a resource that I'm very, very happy is available for free. And the manual, it's probably a little bit of a dense read for a parent or someone with an eating disorder to read. So I wouldn't recommend reading the manual. Or even if you're not a therapist, if you are a medical doctor, nurse, more, it's important that anybody who's kind of willing to help is equipped with the information. Kind of high level look at what's helpful in this book. And I also would recommend some colleagues of mine, their work. So Tabitha Farrar has amazing resources for adults with eating disorders. Lauren Mulheim has a book called When Your Teen Has an Eating Disorder that would also be really good for parents to pick up and read. The handouts in this book are helpful, but Lauren's book is also really great too, just to kind of read start to finish. There are a few more different resources out there, but kind of my favorite would be Jenny Schaefer's work. Life Without Ed is a great read for people with eating disorders who want to recover. It's a memoir that is written very, very well by Jenny Schaefer, who's a friend. And she is very, very careful to not put any triggering content in her memoir, which is something that not all eating disorder memoirists do. Life Without Ed is a great resource as well.
Thank you so much, Tara. Like you have provided us free handouts to the audience there, and to everyone who is actually combating with eating disorder to learn more about it. And what we are going to do is that we are going to support. We are going to make a video of your free handouts for our audience, so that if they cannot, download them, or this, so we would be there to help them and to promote this cause of promoting awareness among people, because I think you have been doing an amazing work. You jot down all those resources, and you have actually put them there free of cost for everyone. And I think this is the biggest service which you are actually doing for so many people who are in trouble. So probably we are going to take your cause ahead, and we are going to make a video on those free resources, and we are going to promote that. So thank you so much for this amazing work. That this was really, I was so impressed to listen that you have been so kind and so generous. Thank you so much for providing us with these resources. So moving towards our last question. Yeah, you want to say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, thank you so much for the kind words, and I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
Okay, moving towards our last question. So now, would you like, in the context of eating disorder, how can we work towards fostering a more inclusive and body positive society, especially in context of developing countries where it is considered as a major taboo? We are lacking within infrastructures and experts for treatment. So, what do you think that how we can achieve it?
Wow, that's a big question. And a very important one as well. These are all great questions, but this one in particular seems it's really big and it's really important. So What I would say is that body positivity starts with you. And it starts with one person working on their own acceptance of themselves. I think what happens is a lot of people kind of rush to kind of a little bit too prematurely and if you don't fully like miles an hour in the wrong direction, trying to help, but also potentially causing harm because maybe you still believe could be harmful. Now, that said, I don't think that it's important to get out there, but with some humility around this for a long time and who have been putting good work at every size movement. And so before kind of getting into that activism, again, working on your own fears, facing your own fears about your body, working on your own acceptance, and then seeing kind of what other people are doing out there, like Alexis Coniston, and reading up on that, and then figuring out how that applies for you and your culture. So when I was working with, and I still am, but when I was working more with an indigenous reservation in Minnesota, it became very clear to me that I knew nothing as an Italian New Yorker about the indigenous culture in Minnesota and kind of more broadly throughout North America. And so what needed to happen was that I, as the professional, needed to learn more about the culture, and then I could offer my interventions as a starting point. And I could say, these are the interventions that work in this population, but it's really important for people in different cultures to figure out how those interventions need to be and rebuilt from the ground up with using some of the basic principles from to sit here in New York and say with certainty what needs to happen in Pakistan. But and people in any given culture is a great starting point. And then again, using the interventions as a start, just a starting point, because they're not going to be fit for every single culture. So I think adapting them, really adapting them to fit those societal issues that come up is really the wisest way forward. So kind of like, I guess, to summarize, doing your own work on body acceptance and facing your fears and eating foods that are scary to eat. Two, kind of looking to see what's out there in terms of the other folks doing great work in the field promoting body neutrality, meaning that body should be considered neutral, not good or bad, moral or amoral. It's a body that's a vehicle for your soul or your consciousness or your person, your personality, and that you are not your body, and that the body is to be nourished and accepted, but not forcibly changed because it's not good enough. Really doing that work and then figuring out how to adapt these principles for your own culture.
So true, Lara, because I think the one of the problem in so many low middle income countries is that we adapt the interventions without putting them into our local context. And when that actually contextization into the local scenario is missing, that is the problem. That those interventions are most of the time they are not effective as they might have been proven in other groups or populations or countries. And another important thing which I think is like I will second that, like I know that there had been so many people who are doing so many interventions, making them, but the impact, the measurement of impact of those interventions, and then the follow up. I guess that is also another very important missing link, which actually do not support the idea, of further strengthening the ecosystem for actually, coming forward and treating the root cause of that. And what I think how wonderfully you have actually the countries specifically uh, their journey from, so how they can easily jot down a roadmap and they can start from there. So
Your loved ones or yourself, if there's an eating disorder that your loved one has or you have. It's so easy, I think, to not want to fight or not get in that fight because it feels like the person might get mad at you or that you have so much to lose. And inevitably, what happens if people don't decide to intervene and help their loved ones is that they regret it. And it's important to give yourself some grace because it's very, very, very difficult to face your own fears of rejection or your loved one getting worse if they have an eating disorder. And it's very difficult to do, but outside intervention for serious eating disorders and any eating disorder really is so helpful. It's similar to drug addiction or alcohol abuse where having an intervention for the person is effective. And so don't discount your role in being able to help your loved one with an eating disorder or yourself out of an eating disorder, and getting your own support network going. So know that you have a lot of power in this situation. It doesn't totally depend on you, but you do have more power maybe than you think. And so to really handouts from my book and those other resources that I really make an impact.
what a beautiful fight your fears, intervene for your loved ones, and do not give up. So thank you so much trusting, and I didn't, feel that time just flew away. So probably another, episode with a new topic, so you can come audience, enlighten them with more facts and with more information regarding eating disorders. So thank you so much, Tara, for joining us today, and we hope to see you in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.